The winter 2024 anime season is turning out to be the season of fantastic female lead characters, and Doctor Elise is one such series with a fantastic female lead character. I just got done with the first 4 episodes of this series, and I have to say that despite some issues that I have with the series overall, I think it's a series that has the most potential in being a very unique story to really kind of dive into. Kind of one of those stories that it seems like it's wrote by a doctor doing a reincarnation / isekai type of story in a way with a mixture of villainous type of thing thrown in there, redemption, a whole bunch of things kind of all mixed in one to create essentially an ultimate redemption story that is filled with the aspect of being a doctor and discovering medicine. But this is my thoughts on those first 4 episodes, so let's just jump right into it. Dr. Elise opens up with a doctor who is in Japan, not Elise. This is somebody that was once in another world as somebody who was a terrible woman who eventually married this prince, became the queen of that nation, and thus became a horrific ruler that eventually led to the deaths of many people until she was eventually burned at the stake, which led to her being reborn into our world, modern times, at which point she had so much regrets for what she did in her previous life that she decided that she wanted to use her entire new life to essentially focus on saving as many lives as possible. And this led her to becoming a doctor and eventually a surgeon, and becoming a really, really incredible surgeon that many people looked up to. She was basically a master in her field. Well, as she was spending this entire life focusing on living as long as possible, being as healthy as possible, and focusing on saving as many lives as possible, eventually her life is cut short because she was in a plane that eventually crashes. Now, while she did survive that plane crash, she spent the entire time after the crash saving as many lives as possible until she realized that she herself was actually bleeding out the entire time, and she collapses and dies. As she's passing away, she actually recalls her family from her previous life, regrets not being able to have a better life there, and yes, regrets it and misses her family. Well, she gets her chance as she wakes up, and she's actually in the body of herself back before she became a terrible queen. Back at the exact point in which she actually had an outburst in wanting to marry the prince of that kingdom. As she goes back into the dining hall where she finds her family there, she breaks down in tears. Her father's going, "No, it's okay. Look, we got the marriage arranged for you. You'll be able to marry. The king has agreed to it. You'll be able to marry the prince. Don't worry." And it's at that point that she realizes, yeah, I don't really think I should actually marry the prince. Instead, she actually wants to focus on, again, technically doing better in this next life in her previous life. Instead of wedding the prince and becoming a queen, she actually wants to become a doctor in this world. So yes, as she ends up meeting with the king and the prince, she ends up telling the king, "Look, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't mean that, I'm not worthy to actually wed your son, I'm going to actually become a doctor instead." Well, the king has kind of been impressed with the way that she's presented herself. He's obviously seen there's something different about her. She's presenting herself differently. She's even engaging in talk about this incident that's going to occur where they're going to be going to war with this one side, and this other kingdom that they didn't actually think about was actually going to intervene and cause the death of many other men. He ends up humoring her and wagers a bet. If she can actually pass the test to become a doctor, within 6 months, he will break off the marriage and she can do whatever she wants. But if she doesn't pass that test, she will marry the prince. Yes, of course, we as the viewers know that she's going to pass the test because she's a modern day surgeon. And this other world obviously doesn't have as advanced technologies. I mean, they have brought up here and there throughout these first 4 episodes that they have things like defibrillators and stuff like that, but their advancements in things like, you know, technically removing a spleen and stuff like that hasn't been there quite yet. So they're advanced, but they're not quite as to the levels of modern day science. But yeah, at this point, Elise ends up being kind of sent off to this one hospital where they figure is going to be a pretty rough hospital for her to go to. It figures that she'll go there, realize how horrific it is, and being a noble's daughter, she's probably going to give up very quickly and come back home, and then she'll marry the prince and everybody will be happy. But no, once she gets there, even though the boss there, Graham, is not really liking the idea that he has to babysit this noble's daughter, he's very quickly impressed by how quickly she goes into this commoner's area, cleans up the place, makes sure it's nice and sanitary to kind of get rid of all the infections that can come from that. She quickly helps this guy with bed sores that his skin has actually gone to necrosis and everything like that. She removes it, gets it nice and patched up. Eventually, she ends up helping, again, remove the spleen because it's been shot by a bullet. She does all these things that just absolutely impress this doctor at this hospital and gains her a lot of notoriety in the area. Additionally, this guy that had his spleen removed was technically there protecting the prince that she's supposed to wed, and he's there undercover, so he gets to witness how incredible Elise is. It gives really quickly this idea of a lot of people kind of wondering, how does she learn all this stuff? And she claims that she is self-taught, but there's a lot of emphasis on the idea of, man, this girl is either somebody's impressioned upon her, like knowledge that she shouldn't really have, or she's just straight up a genius. So a lot of people are getting very impressed by her skills. And of course, she's gaining the interest of the prince himself. And it seems like the king himself is getting interest too, because yes, as they investigated this other kingdom that was supposed to be involved in this battle, they find out that yes, they were on the move. And so she essentially helped them prevent many losses. So my thoughts on Doctor Elise. This series so far has been a huge shocker for me. I have been actually really enjoying this show. It's mostly around Elise herself. I do like the idea of the villainous redemption stories. We get a lot of them. They're the idea of a villainess that's terrible. She's like an empress or whatever. She does something horrible. The kingdom themselves just take her down, and then she's, time skip back, and then she gets to try again. But this is sort of a different twist in the idea that she gets this brief moment where she's no longer in her world, this kind of Victorian setting kind of set up where it's not way back in time. Like I said, they have defibrillators and stuff like that, and surgery and anesthetics and stuff like that, but it's nowhere near our modern times science. So she's getting this brief moment where she dies over here because she's a horrible queen. She goes over into our world where she becomes like a surgeon and everything like that. She just focuses her entire, she was like, when she was a kid, she lost her parents. And so she spent her time from like, ever since she was like 5 years old, doing nothing but researching medicine. And so obviously when she becomes an adult, she becomes a very, very skilled surgeon and doctor. And she becomes like this prodigy. Like everybody looks up to her, like she's incredible. Everybody thinks she's like the best surgeon out there. But unfortunately, she doesn't get to live out her entire life redeeming herself for her past mistakes. Instead, at some point, again, her life gets cut short. But it's kind of interesting, the idea that it then brings her back into her previous life where she's, not of age yet, but she's like 6 months from being of age. And so she has her whole life ahead of her technically, but she doesn't want to pivot back to her old life because she feels like she's not worthy of it. I do like the initial moments of her life back in her previous life, and the idea that when she first gets there, and she tells the king, look, I'm sorry, I apologize. She even grovels in front of the king. I'm so sorry because I know my father talked you into this and you agreed to it and everything, but I can't do it. I'm not worthy of the crown. I'm not worthy of being essentially the mother of the kingdom itself. She prostrates herself and everything. But yes, there's the other side of it that she doesn't want to be this queen. She wants to do whatever she can to save as many lives as possible. Now, there could be an argument to be made there, and I think that's the direction they'll eventually go, in the idea that, yes, technically you can be somebody that can help a lot of people as the queen. It's just from her mindset, the only way that I can save many lives is if I go the route of being a doctor. Because she does have knowledge of what will unfold in this kingdom. Things like pandemics and everything that's going to befall the kingdom. And she writes it all down. Like I gotta write this stuff. I'm back in this life. I gotta write down everything that happens from this point on so I can work to prevent them in the future. And again, a lot of that has to do with illnesses that struck. Even the king himself, she, based on knowledge, knows that he's going to die eventually, and through questioning him, finds out that he has diabetes. And so she does have this knowledge, this future knowledge, plus her past knowledge of her previous life there, that she's kind of putting together. Modern medicine, and she's applying it to everything she knows that's going to unfold in this world, and trying to undo it. That's sort of what they're setting up is going to be the chemistry. And again, technically, she can utilize her knowledge, not just being a doctor, but she can utilize it as being a queen, basically. So I'm kind of curious at the direction it's going to go, is that, yes, for now, she's going to be a doctor trying to save lives. She's already gaining the interest of a lot of academics. A lot of doctors are going, holy crap, this girl just figured out how to remove a spleen. They haven't figured that out. Removing a spleen and cutting it off and everything like that, that's just something they've never figured out yet. And so when this guy comes in with a bullet to the spleen, they're like, he's dead. But she's like, no, I'll handle it. So this thing that she's doing, and they're writing up papers about it, and it's freaking everybody out. Like, how does she know this? How does she figure that out? Even with the diabetes, there's like 20 academics that had an idea, but they hadn't figured out the solution. And so when she mentions it, this guy's like, only the top 20 know about this. How does she know about this? She's a genius. And I think as she gets all the interest of everybody, I think she's going to become such a figure that she's not going to be able to hold that interest to her. And I think it's going to pivot to the prince, because they've already kind of indicated the prince himself actually has interest in Elise. When she first declines the king, and then she goes off to walk with the prince, because the king's like, you guys haven't got to talk to each other, go ahead and talk to each other. And as she's walking with the prince, she assumed, again, that the only reason that he was wedding her was because her father pushed it upon the king, and the king ended up telling the prince, marry her. And so she assumed that he always hated her. Even in her previous life, whenever she was giving him tea and stuff like that, he's like, look, let me make it straight. I'm only marrying you because my father told me to. So she thought that this is going to be like a burden upon him. So she apologizes to him and says, look, I'm sorry that this got put on you. I know that you don't want this. And he turned around and he said, when did I ever say that I wasn't interested? When did I ever say that I didn't want to marry you? So it's already implying that she sort of has interest. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that she's showing how smart she is. Again, she's figuring out that there might be this sugar issue with the king, with his diabetes and stuff like that, his blood pressure. And then she's figuring out this whole thing with the two kingdoms battling each other and possibly this other kingdom be involved. She's showing a lot of things that are saving the life of the king, saving the life of the people, saving the life of her brother who was supposed to be in that war. She's doing all this incredible stuff. And then now for him to witness her essentially remove somebody's spleen, he's probably getting very impressed by her. I mean, he's blushing over her when she's trying to figure out why he's fatigued when she doesn't know who it is. And yeah, I think that's probably the direction it's going to go, is eventually he's gonna go after her. And I think it's going to be really cool to possibly bring her into like the royal court or whatever, and then use her, not just have her focus on saving as many lives by her own hands, but using her knowledge through the royal courts to essentially bestow that knowledge in a broader sense. Rather than her focusing on one life at a time, she can focus on giving her knowledge to hundreds that can then save thousands. And I'm assuming that's the direction it's going to go. And then every now and then possibly have to do some, direct work herself to save an important person's life. And I think that could actually be really cool depending on how they handle that. I also think they're handling a lot of the medicine type stuff well. I'm not like an expert in medicine or medical stuff like that, so I'm not like going to be able to say yes or no if this person knows what they're doing. Usually I can check the Wikipedia and it says if the author is in medicine or whatever. I'm assuming they have at least a basic knowledge in medicine, because it seems like everything is pretty on point. I mean, it's hitting a lot of the basic stuff like sanitation and stuff like that, but there's also doing a lot more extra stuff like, getting into relieving pressure from a leaking lung, or again, technically removing a spleen. So it at least seems like the author knows what they're talking about. Visually, it's doing decent as well. I haven't really had too many complaints about the visuals. I mean, it's not over the top really great, but at the same time, everything's keeping on model. The visuals look pretty good. It has a style to it that's pretty decent. I'm not like a huge fan of it, but at the same time, it's well enough. But we'll see from here. That's my thoughts on Doctor Elise, a series that is so far keeping my interest. I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. Very unique little take on the reincarnated / villainous / isekai, reverse isekai, what do you want to call it? It's like, it just feels very weird that we have like both Seventh Loop and this one at the same time, which is essentially about somebody who lives another life and gains a lot of knowledge and then applies that knowledge to their new life. But we'll see where it goes from here. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's all this series so far if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate what it does, and y'all take care.